Welcome to the Big Money Question Show. I'm Rachel Rickard-Strauss, Personal Finance Editor for This Is Money. Today our question is, how do we talk about money? It seems like such an obvious question, but one that we don't necessarily probe as much as the question warrants. So we are lucky enough to have Diana Chambers with us today. She is a family wealth mentor, and she's also an author of a book that's come out a couple of months ago, Letters on Money, Life and Love. And Diana, thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be here.
I should probably start by asking you, what is a family wealth mentor?
So a family wealth mentor is a person who helps their clients to manage their wealth in ways that support their lives and relationships and help them to flourish. So many people could fall in that bracket. Investment advisors, for example, helping to manage the wealth such that it will support and sustain the family. But I use it very distinctively to focus on my clients' lives and relationships. How can we make sure that the wealth enhances their family dynamics, that they understand their relationship with money and the impact that it has both on them and on their close relationships?
Okay. So then I wonder, from your wealth of experience, what would you give as sort of the top advice to viewers on controlling their money so that they don't feel controlled by it?
So the primary step to take is on growing in our own awareness of the role that money plays in our lives. So at base, money is nothing more than a medium of exchange, but we have imbued it with tremendous significance, power, and meaning. Symbolic meaning. And so it's important for us to understand the role that money plays in our lives and to get to the root of that so that once we know, we actually have the freedom to choose.
Okay.
When we don't know, we are more at the mercy of the way that money plays out in our lives.
How do we do that?
So we consciously look at the money dynamics in our lives, and for example, if we were to feel envious of one of our friends and what they had or how they spent or with the vacations that they went on, we could use that to say, okay, what's this about in me? Why am I feeling envious? I can afford to go on the same vacations. I choose not to spend my money in that way. So what is it at root that is leading me to have this feeling, and therefore how can I reframe it so that I no longer feel that I need to compare and contrast myself with this friend?
Okay. So it's sort of a matter of really looking at ourselves and understanding our relationship with money, what role it plays, and then try to sort of make it work for us.
Right. And what drove our understanding and our beliefs about money in the first place? So a lot of that is shaped both by our families of origin and by our culture. So the money messages that we received when we were growing up about scarcity or abundance, about the whether money is a responsibility or not, or whether it's potentially a burden, or whether we're anxious about it, if we saw parents fight over it, all of these are going to color our own perspective on money. So the more that we can understand about that, then the greater distance we can have from it and therefore make our choices, and we therefore move into a place of managing and directing our money.
It seems to me that we, the British, are particularly bad at talking about money. And perhaps that's part of the problem, that we, by not talking, then we don't explore these sorts of issues amongst ourselves or amongst friends and family. So how do we get better, if that's what we need to do, at talking about money?
So I'm really glad you asked this question, because I believe that the ability to communicate and talk effectively about money in meaningful ways is really the first and best line of defense in any challenges or conflicts that we might be having about money. And yes, I think that it is very hard in our British culture to sometimes do that. They look like they're going to be very difficult conversations. But my perspective is that if we don't have those conversations, then the outcomes that we're afraid of are more likely to transpire, that we are more likely to damage a relationship or lose a relationship if we don't address something that we know needs to be addressed. So it is really important that we have them, and it's a skill that we can learn, and it gets easier with practice.
Okay, so tips for kind of getting that process going.
Okay, so the first thing that we need to know is, what am I bringing to the table in my side of the conversation? So to get as clear and conscious as we can about what's playing out for us around whatever the money dynamic is. Then to empathize with the other person in the conversation and to try to stand in their shoes and think, what has brought them to this place? And our belief systems may be very different. Then it's always helpful to think about the setting for a money conversation. Don't do it on the fly. Don't do it, when everyone's tired or when you're going to be interrupted. Create a good and safe space and invite the other person to have the conversation. Don't just assume they will have this, but say words to the effect of, I would really like to talk about this subject, and I would like to do this in a way that we're both comfortable and have time to really address it. Would you be willing to do this? And have them participate in agreeing that yes, we'll have this conversation, and then do it in a setting where both people can be fully present.
Okay, so it's a matter of almost taking it out of sort of the day-to-day, creating a space in which to do it, a time that makes sense to do it, remove it from from your sort of day-to-day routine.
Yes, that can be true, and my goal would be that ultimately all of us are comfortable having money conversations in a very open and informal way, so that over time we get much more adept at having these conversations, so we can do them in, while we're having coffee, or in a much more informal manner.
Okay.
So until we get used to it and good at it, we probably need to set it aside in its own space.
Okay. So now the format of the book are letters from people to which you respond with advice.
Yes.
So I was wondering if I could throw a few sort of scenarios at you, and then we can talk through probably some of the most common awkward money situations.
Absolutely.
So number one, the situation where two people do something together, say they go out for dinner, and one of them earns considerably more than the other. How do you deal with that dynamic? What are the sort of issues to consider?
So this challenge of money between friends and who pays for what is a very typical challenge. And I'm sure we've all experienced it. Going out for dinner, someone orders an expensive bottle of wine, one of us only drinks one glass. Who should really pay for that? There is no one answer to this, because it will all depend on the history, the dynamics, who invited who for dinner, and whether there is a pattern that's already playing out or not. So all of those things would need to be taken into consideration. But again, it points back to the value of being able to talk constructively and in a non-judgmental way about money. So if two couples were out for dinner and one couple ordered a very expensive bottle of wine, how's the other couple going to respond? And maybe they don't in that instance, but then they have another conversation later. But if they don't address it, we know for sure that they're not going to continue to have meals out together as friends without it causing some friction in their relationship.
Okay, so it's not an answer in terms of who should pay for what, but there is an answer in terms of you have to talk about it.
How you address it.
If you see that it's going to be an issue.
And it might be that you want to anticipate it at the outset. So if you're the party who doesn't have the same level as financial resource as your friend, and your friend suggests a very expensive restaurant, you might want to say, that restaurant's lovely, I only go there for special celebrations because it's outside my budget. I would like to contribute, I would like to pay my part of the meal, but I can't afford on this occasion to do this. And see what the friend says.
Okay. Moving on to another one, not
Yeah.
always well, it can be a sticky one, wills.
Yeah.
I wonder whether you think that there are times when it could be detrimental to children to bequeath wealth to them, or ultimately whether that sort of is the most logical thing to do. And at what point you sort of talk about those issues, whether you, or whether you need to at all.
Again, that's a really nuanced question. I think it's a matter of scale and expectation and the financial maturity of the person who's going to receive the bequest. So we want to know that whatever we gift will genuinely enhance a person's life. So as the giver, we want to be clear and sure that that gift is additive and it's not going to trip the recipient up in any way. So that means that we need to know the recipient very well. If it's a parent and a child, hopefully that's the case. So it's a matter of a very thoughtful gift, and if it's done very thoughtfully, then I would like to imagine that there can be a good conversation about it, initiated by the parent to say, you know, I'm anticipating my will, and I would like to make a gift to you or to you and your siblings, whatever it is, and I'd like to talk about it with you, to share with you my hopes, my intentions, and why I'm setting it up this way. And then it initiates a conversation.
Okay. And that's always better than sort of almost avoiding the storm yourself and doing what you think makes the most sense, and then they'll find out about it later.
I believe that it is, if it's possible, it's better to communicate in advance so that everybody knows what's expected and anticipated, and there are no uncertainties. And if for some reason a will is distributed, let's say unequally among siblings, the parents have had a reason for doing that, and if they can communicate with their children why they have chosen that, it can sidestep problems between the siblings after the will is revealed. So it enhances the family relationships to be able to communicate effectively about it.
Okay. I wanted to ask you finally, so you deal with people of all different levels of wealth, some very wealthy, some less so. In your experience, have you noticed, does money make people happy?
If we have the right relationship to money, it absolutely can enhance our lives and make us happier. Much of the initial research was always that beyond a certain level of income, money is not going to make you happier. The more recent research shows that how we spend our money actually can enhance our happiness. And so at a big picture level, that would be if we were spending on primarily two categories. One would be to strengthen our social networks and have experiences with the people with whom we're close and in our communities. And the other would be to support our sense of meaning and purpose. It could be that we're giving to a cause that we care about. That will increase our happiness. There are then other suggestions from the research about how we can increase our happiness with the way we spend. For example, if we don't always have or treat ourselves to something that we desire, but we keep it literally as a treat, as an exception, then when we do have it, we really love it. But if we have it all the time, it no longer has that ability to satisfy us. So yes, money can make us happier.
Okay, that's a good note to end on. Diana, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for joining us on the Big Money Questions.